Good morning, everybody. Let's see. So I'm Dr. Rachel Headley. My company is the Rose Group International, actually. What we do is we worry about IX. So you may have heard about UX, user experience, CX, customer experience. We've taken that and actually turned the focus internal to the company. So we're focused on the internal experience of organizations. So to get started, I'm going to give you 2 questions. And if you don't have something to write down with, use your phone, make a note, or just remember. Okay, so let me see if I can remember my own questions here. So what I want is an agree or disagree with each question. So I have 2 questions. I've narrowed it down to 2. I think I can remember. Okay, I gotta remember. Okay, I do not let others influence my decision making. Agree or disagree? I do not let others influence my decision making. Agree or disagree? The second question is, it is better to be adaptable than to be organized. Agree or disagree? And I know everyone wants to be in the middle or have both, but you got to pick one or the other. So if you keep those 2 things in mind, I do not let others influence my decisions, and it is better to be adaptable than to be organized. Those are the 2. All right, so based on those 2 questions, now if I work with a company, I ask a lot more questions, but those 2 give me an indication of the kind of team you like to work in, and also the way that you like to work. So what we've done is we've taken all of the history and the research behind personality types. And what we find with that, we get frustrated with Myers-Briggs. I'm an ENTJ. I know that. I've learned a lot about myself.
Mic works.
Oh, the mic's working. Wherever it is. Should I shut this off or is it
Yeah.
okay? Just turn it off for a minute. Okay, go. So we get frustrated with Myers-Briggs and DISC and all the things you've probably taken a million times because they tell you a lot about yourself, but they don't tell you a whole lot about how you interact with all of you nice people in this room. I'm an ENTJ, you are probably a variety of those things, but I don't really get how to work. If I had to build this team, if I had to build this group as a team, I wouldn't really know how to do that with those indicators very well. And so we heard the mic working. No, we heard the mic, so we'll get it up here before we start.
There we go.
Thank you. I'm getting feedback here. Okay, so what we've done is we've taken those and turned them 90 degrees. Same research from the 1920s. Carl Jung's work is what all those personality profiles are based on. And we've changed, and we've really set up a way to look at a team-based environment and how you like to work in a team. And what we find is this is incredibly helpful, actually successful, actually solves problems in companies. And so this is what your answers tell me about how you like to work. So who had 2 agrees? Just 1, 2 people? You're what we call an independent. And what that means is you can work on your own. You don't mind working on your own. And you also like a little freedom in your day. You don't mind if you come into work every day and there's something different to do. And you get to decide. So order is on this end and chaos is on that end. So if you're an order person, you think that's chaos. If you're a chaos person, you think that's freedom, right? So it kind of depends on your perspective. All right, who's a minus? Any disagree? Any of those in the room? We have a couple people, 3 people. What that means to me is that you love working in a team environment. And you love creating order out of chaos. You love team building. You love to be creative. You're that core team person that you might be engineer. You might be. I have a lot of HR professionals are down here. How about a disagree, agree? There's my fixers. That's what I am. What that means to me is that you love working for teams in a team for other people, but you like having a little problem-solving chaos in your life. Maybe you don't mind coming into the office and having something, a fire drill to go do. But you really care about what's going on around you in your team. And that's what motivates you. It doesn't mean that independents aren't motivated by team. It's just that if they have to do something that no one else likes, they don't really mind. In fact, a lot of independents like to be the rebel, like to do something that everyone's like, why are you doing that? because and then how about a plus, agree, disagree? No organizers in here. Wow, I love it. Organizers are, I think of organizers a lot as, let's say, my CPA, who I can bring her a shoebox full of receipts, and she makes a 1040 for the IRS, right? She loves creating order out of chaos, and she works, on her own in her own office. So she works on her own. So the power of this, so this is the percentages. About 43% of the world stabilizers, 22% fixers, organizers, and independents. What tells us about this is if I know I have about half fixers in this room, some stabilizers, and some independents, I could create a team environment that would leverage the way you like to work the best. So I have an IT background with my satellite work, and what I might do is say, for an independent, for Alan, I might say, hey, I've got this problem, here's some data, can you go figure out a way to make this problem go away, or to resolve this issue? Now, that might be a job that a stabilizer might like, but they'd rather do it in a team environment, perhaps. And so I can figure out what's going on. And actually, it's a great problem solver, because Alan might have a hard time dealing with, sorry, what's your name? Mike. Alan and Mike, stabilizer and independent, they might actually have a hard time interacting, because Mike's like, hey man, bring down the craziness. I need to figure out how to make this work. And Alan's like, no, this is a great idea. Trust me, come on, let's go. And so sometimes we have a real disconnect in the culture of a company because of these culture types. So what we want to do is we want to make every single person that goes to work have a great day. And that seems a little woo-woo, but it's really possible. And the fact that 70+% of people feel disengaged from their work is a leadership choice. Because if the leadership decides that they're going to work with their people in a way that makes them excited and energized about their work, that's possible. But most leaders don't worry enough about that, in our opinion. A big challenge for people is change. A lot of people don't like change. They think change is hard, they think change sucks. Frankly, change is exciting and fun. I mean, we can all think of a change that we've loved, whether it's we decide to go off to college, we decide to get married, we decide to buy a house. All those changes are fun, maybe stressful, but fun. And then we can all think of changes that we hated, right? And those are usually changes that are put upon us. Your boss says you're going to work for this other guy now. Maybe you lose your job, right? I got reorganized out of a job, which is a total ego kill, by the way. And so what we've done is we've taken all of the research about change, so there's a whole, I don't have, the 6 minutes will not allow me to tell you about it, but we have taken all of the existing research about change transitions and how people move through change, and this is incredibly enlightening. If you ever get a chance to talk to me about it, I would love to bend your ear, because it's incredibly powerful, and it's a way that you can combine the culture type that you are, or your team is, with going through change. And the important part here is you can have a really innovative phase through a change transition, and this is how you can create innovation in an existing company that feels pretty stagnant. And so when IBM says we need an innovation team, and it doesn't work, it's because they're not really taking advantage of this idea. And so that's a key thing for us. I think that's my 6 minutes. I'm going to go flip back here to these guys so you can, that's a lot to talk about in 6 minutes.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Marie.
Yeah.
Just breaking the ice.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your, maybe your top 2 ideal clients? So you talked about a high investment level and then maybe opening your space and your efforts to a wider population. So just tell us who that looks like from an, if I want to come to you.
Client, sure, absolutely, great question. Thank you. So my ideal client, where we tend to work at the top of the pyramid is, we have got a couple examples. One is we work with investors. So let's say you want to go buy a company, and you have all the financial spreadsheets in front of you, it looks pretty good, but I tell you the one thing that will kill that company that is not on that spreadsheet is the culture of that company. And so we can go in and assess the culture, we look at how they get things done, unspoken conversations, what things don't they address, what are the elephants in the room that are pretending that don't exist. There's one company that we were asked to go look at, and it was a financial software development company. And the senior team are all organizers. They're all senior level bankers from some investment banking. And then, of course, the guys doing the work are millennial coders, right? Millennial software engineers. And the millennials wanted everything about freedom. They're agile developers. That means that they just want to do whatever the hell they want when they want. Not exactly, but that's they get to drive the development schedule. And of course, the senior guys are like, wait, we come from a highly regulated, highly organized environment. We need more control over what this side is doing. And at first, everyone was super excited. They're going to make a ton of money. We're going to go put this awesome thing out. And they just sort of put up with each other. And now 2.5 years later, they can't even have a meeting. You know, the development team hasn't put out anything significant in a year. The senior folks are blaming them. There's a lot of blaming. And so we come in and we can talk to the investor about, okay, this is what we have to do to fix this and actually get you an exit. He had already invested, and we're like, okay, this is what your exit strategy looks like to actually get this company on the road to success, so you can actually have a public offering and get out of this company and get your investment back. So that's our high-end clients. Our broader clients, there's a big manufacturing company, and so we work with a lot of manufacturing, and what they want, they have an internal training team, but they have a lot of issues with leadership and accountability, and because they're promoting from within. So this is the cool thing about this stuff. So if you're going into a manufacturing as a young person into a job, if you're a fixer or an independent, you're probably not going to take that job. Because it's the same kind of thing every day. You can be the best dang welder or whatever every single day, but there's not a lot of chaos in your life. And so if you like that energy of that change and chaos all the time, you're going to self-select to not take these jobs. They're mostly organizers and stabilizers. So of course the next logical step is you're the best thing at what you do. You get promoted up through the ranks. Well, now you have a stabilizer leader. And that's just a different kind of leader than you're going to have if you're an independent or a fixer leader. So a stabilizer leader likes to keep things calm, doesn't like people getting pissed off, doesn't like a lot of chaos. But the executives in that company want their leaders to take an active role in problem solving, and being predictive about change. And so what happens with them is those stabilizer leaders, they're great at what they do, and they take care of their people. They don't look outside of their team very much. And so we can go in and say to that company, train their trainers, because they have an internal training organization. We can train their trainers in this stuff and help them understand what their leaders actually are good at, nurture those things, and then what are leaders going to struggle with, depending on their culture type. And so if we understand the culture type of the organization, culture type of the leadership team, we can really help make all of those changes, all of those initiatives stick and actually be effective. So those are the two. So the trainers are sort of the low level, $1,500 a piece certification, very easy entry level. And so that's that. And then we also do independent consultants for that level. So. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the company that you dealt with that had Agile. Did you involve the C-level leaders in the Agile system, or did you take on a totally different system to wrap it all together?
That's a good question. So how did I solve that problem? So what we want to do is we want to honor everybody in the system, right? So there's a lot of talk about generational differences, millennials and Gen X and baby boomers. But what we want to say is we don't want to expect the millennials to act like baby boomers. We don't expect baby boomers to act like millennials. So it's the same way in here. We want to honor where everyone lives, right? So we don't say that if you're a stabilizer, you're bad, and you're an organizer, you're good. So what we want to do is create agreements between these groups so that they can actually execute the work in a way that everyone feels good about it. So what we did is we said, okay, well, we need a little more program governance between the agile development and the senior leadership. And we got together with everybody and said, what independent engineers, what could you guys give up a little bit could you give us a daily report? Could you give us can we set up a change management structure so that the organizers feel a little bit more control, and you guys still stay as independent as possible. So we set up like a 2 or 3 step process where everyone felt like they were a little more engaged, a little more, the organizers felt like they had a little more control, and there's a little more process. The engineers hated it, but they recognized that if they can get these guys on board, everyone's gonna move forward faster. So basically we made everyone a little bit uncomfortable, but also sort of honored the information and the way that they work. So, and that's different for every company, similar process, but the specifics we determine with the team. So there's buy-in, there's engagement, and they'll actually go forward with it instead of digging their heels in. Because we know those people. But we love them too. They're stabilizers. I may not be talking into it right.
We just have to talk closer. There we go.
It's one of those unidirectional ones.
Can you tell us a little bit, I mean, we know a slight bit of your background. I'm assuming you live here.
Spearfish.
Spearfish, okay.
Yep.
And then organizations, I'm assuming you work with them all over the world. Do you work with any locally or looking to work with any locally or mostly just around the world?
Thank you. I like working around the world, but mostly what happened for us is, it's kind of one of those, we might be too close to Rapid City to be experts for Rapid City companies, because it's like the rule, if you're 50 miles from home, all of a sudden you're an expert, But no, we work all over mostly the US, we do have some Canadian companies, but with the certification we're looking to expand internationally beyond that. We work locally. Right now we do a lot of board moderating for nonprofit boards, executive boards, that have either sort of intractable challenges or they have issues that they can't seem to resolve amongst themselves. So we do a lot of board retreats. We have some smaller clients, and saying smaller is not really fair because the investment level is still pretty high, but they're more, the clients we have here are much more tactical. So we go in and help them, like there's a 5-person office, and we go in and figure out how they can actually work together and move forward as an organization. But our really big clients are not here. We grow our company through networking, and so we'd be happy to work locally. But our networking groups are nationwide, so we tend to be in San Francisco and Phoenix and Dallas, and that's where we get clients. So yeah, we do work locally. We just don't do it as much as we'd like. Back row.
Rachel, I'm wondering how you got started. Just tell us your story, like how you landed on Rose International, coming from where you came from with the engineering and et cetera.
We all have these crazy career paths, right? Yes. So my background is my PhD is actually in science, and so I started as a PhD scientist doing satellite work. Rolled over into the engineering in the satellite. I went over to the operational side of the house, operational science officer. And then what I did is we launched a satellite in 2013, and I got to be at the top of the launch tower the day before launch, at the fairing, at the nose cone. And I thought, it's probably not gonna get cooler than this. That's probably the height of my satellite career. But then we reorganized, and I was working from Spearfish already. I was living in Spearfish because all my clients were Google and Esri, which is a big mapping organization, and supporting NASA scientists all over in our international ground stations. And so I didn't really have to live at where most of the team lived. And so what I did is I decided to take the opportunity to start consulting. So I resigned after about 8 months after that satellite launch, after on-orbit checkout, and started consulting. And if there's any consultants in the room, you know that one of the big challenges is how do you actually make your consulting stick? So I went into NOAA, the weather people, and they have the National Climate Data Center in Asheville, North Carolina, and they called, through a couple people, they called me in to work on building their consumer base, because Landsat has 40,000 users all over the world, and they have much smaller group of users, even though they're a much huger budget and a much larger organization. Anyway, so I went in there and we were all excited and we did all this great stuff and I gave a report and everyone was excited to go execute it. And of course, 3 months later, I called to see how it was going and nothing had been done. Because, I don't know whose phone that is.
That's mine, I'm sorry.
Busted. It's all right, we've all done it. It wasn't mine. But I knew it's not my ring, otherwise I would have been running over there. And so I was really frustrated that it didn't stick, because what happened after, the minute I walked out the door, they had a major reorganization of 4 of their data centers. And of course, that means all of the great things we had worked on were like, oh, this change is happening, I can't even think about this other change that we're doing, that we're supposed to do. And so I was really disappointed in that. And so what I did is I decided to figure out why training doesn't stick and why change is so hard for people. And that's when I got into that change transition model and started looking at that. And frankly, change affects everybody a little differently. So if you think about a couple, maybe they move to a new town and maybe the woman is like ready to go and she's making friends and out in the community, and the guy's at home miserable because he feels like he doesn't belong, he doesn't have any social network, doesn't have any, might go to work but doesn't have any golf buddies in town or whatever. And so I was starting to wonder, like, why do we see people moving through the exact same change at different rates? What is it about us that do that? And that's actually what led us to this. So we started looking at individual traits, and all of the Myers-Briggs and DISC and all those things, but it didn't really hook the team. How do you get a team through change? How do you get a team to engage and buy into what you're doing? And so that's really how we developed our IP around how you actually make this happen. So that's how I got here. And so about 2 years ago, so I'm a scientist, very process oriented. In science, what you do is in my kind of science, you look across all of these things, you do a bunch of investigation, and then you try to figure out what's in common and what actually makes a difference. And it's the same thing I do in business. I go into a business, I interview everyone, I look at all their documentation, look at all their processes, and figure out what's really going on here. So it's actually very much the same process. But it's the sticking point, is this, how do you make the new stuff stick, that I was really interested in. And so about 2 years ago, we started kind of talking about this stuff, and she's an expert in communication and has strategic leadership, master's degree and things like that. And we really started creating this IP around between my process-based brain, and that's how I like to work, how do you actually get shit done? This is what I do. She is much more about taking care of the people. So we kind of make this joke, is that we go into a company and I figure out how to get things done, and she makes sure everyone's doing okay, right? So that's kind of our split. And so we actually created Rose Group as an organization about a year ago now. But we've developed this over time, and I was starting to implement the ideas into existing consulting work that I was already doing, just to see how it would work. And so we've actually come out of sort of a beta phase, I would say, and now we feel like we're pretty solid in our process. So that's how I made it to consulting. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
What is the difference between what you're doing with the culture, in the work environment?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And using other personality assessments?
Yeah, great question. We get that all the time. So the key difference, in fact, we're pitching investors to build out our online program. So we've done a lot of thinking about this, because we get this question all the time. So the big difference is our typing is actually specifically designed for a team environment, and that is all the other ones, DISC, MBTI, all the other ones. They're designed for personal, individual assessments, leadership, and all that stuff. And so we are absolutely focused on the team end of the scale. The other thing is what we find is that MBTI and DISC, and there's another, ProSci is a company that does change management certification. There's a huge range between how you actually problem solve with other personality types. So we find that MBTI and DISC and some of those are very informative, but do you actually ever walk into a company who's like ass kicking and they say, oh my God, MBTI is what did it for us? Like, not really. That it's informative and it can really help leadership styles and personal development, but we find that we actually argue a lot that all of this focus on individual development has actually led to a lack of development on culture. Because culture, everyone wants to work in a great culture. Nobody has a clue how to do it. And so that's why that's the difference, is that we actually come in and figure out how you can make your culture the best it can be. We call it best in class, IX. So that's really the difference, is that we use our culture types to focus on the environment, not on the individual.
Other questions?
Anything else?
Rachel, you said you're effectively coming out of beta. How much data do you have to validate your model? I mean, what's your data points?
Thank you. At last count, we have worked in over 12 industries. And I shouldn't say industry, I should say sectors. So whether it's healthcare, military, manufacturing, IT, startup. So we've worked in over 12 sectors. And we've tested, we've typed, we were trying to do the math just yesterday, and I think we're over 1,500 people typed, and we've had a huge amount of success with it. So if we actually go in and say, well, how many lives have we changed? How many companies have we changed? We haven't really got that number nailed down yet. We're actually trying to get that statistic. But we feel like it's been, like we have an online quiz that has over 1,000 people that have taken it. And most of those people we have encouraged to take it. So then we can track how many people, how close is it? Is it the result? In fact, our biggest change happened after we had about 1,000 people typed. We actually changed the name of this because we called this originally a connector. So really, it's not the back end, how we determine what you do and how you do it and what you like and what your fears are and what motivates you. It's really the naming that we ended up changing because no one liked to be called a connector. And I don't know why. It did not feel strong. It felt really weak to people. Like, oh, I don't want to be that. So we really had to think about these. We wanted to make these egoic labels so that people are like, oh yeah, I'm an organizer. And that really resonated with them. So we have, the only thing that really came out of the beta phase was a name change. We didn't actually change how we evaluate teams. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But in the 12 sectors, we've worked with, I don't know, at least 50 companies, and we've done this with all of those. And so it's really agnostic as far as, it's sort of like MBTI. You can take the Myers-Briggs test no matter what industry you're in or whatever. And that's kind of the same way, because the Carl Jung research is all about the population as a whole, not focused on an individual industry. So it really works well for us. And we want to keep doing that work. Part of the reason we're asking for investment to build out the online certification is that I don't want to be distracted from building more of those case studies and more of those statistics, so more of the validation piece of it. So we're still pushing forward on that because that's what I want to do, but there's a huge amount of income potential in the online stuff. And so we know we need to go down that path. I don't want to personally do it because I love the problem solving. I'm a fixer. And a lot of that online stuff is a little more stable. And it's just not as fun. The money's fun.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Can you share with us a time where you've gone into an organization or a company and you thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, like one of your biggest challenges of one of the companies you've worked with?
Yeah, well, that happens on most of them at first, until you kind of get to know what's going on. Because really, a lot of times we walk into an organization totally blind, because they usually call us for something else. Very rarely, I don't think we've ever got a phone call that said, we need to fix our culture, right? Because that, I think, for leadership, that feels a little too personal, right? You have to actually admit that you don't know what you're doing, or you're having trouble with it. And we're all egocentric people. So what a lot of times we get called in, like there was one organization, I won't say who it is, very big, $2 billion project portfolio. And they called us and they said, we just can't get anything done on time. Like we are late on everything. And we have this scheduling issue. And so I'm like, okay, and I'm a project management professional, which isn't actually a big certification, it's very hard to get. And so when I was doing satellite work, I got my PMP certification. And so a lot of people call us because they know I'm a project manager. And so I went there and we did the analysis. Turns out it had nothing to do with their scheduling. They had spent a ton of money on the best scheduling software. But they still, a year and a half before I showed up, and they still couldn't make their schedules work. Well, it turns out had nothing to do with scheduling, it had everything to do with how they were organized. So they were organized as a very old company, very old organization. They were organized by function. So this function but they were project-based. They had a $2 billion project portfolio. And they got funding, and their clients are all based on projects. So they got think of like an engineering firm. It wasn't an engineering firm, but that's the analogy. So an engineering firm gets a giant client, and instead of having someone in the company own that project and make sure that it goes through on a timely manner, they just had one guy in this function would do it, and then he'd throw it over the wall to the other guy, the next guy in line, and that guy was out on vacation, or he was out in the field, or he wasn't available, or he was working on some other big project, and so all of a sudden you're 2 weeks behind right away in the very second step of the project, and then he would throw it over the wall and he got it done, and then that person wasn't ready for it because there wasn't anyone telling him it was coming, and it was like this, it is really a project management disaster. And so I went to the executive and I said, you guys, we assume everyone is a good actor. We assume that everyone has the best intentions at heart. So there's no jackasses in this situation. It's just people are doing the best they can. And they just didn't have an organization and a culture that facilitated getting things done very well. So I went to the executive and I said, here's some things that I think we need to do. One, they didn't have any change management process at all. And with this whole problem, the functional problem, that's all you have is change. Change happening, scope changes all the time. And then I said, and what we really need to do is refocus your organization to be more project-based. And of course that's terrifying to organizations because everyone hates it, reorganizing. And it turns out that the gentleman's name was Mike. It's a common enough name, I think I can get away with it. Mike is a stabilizer, and he absolutely did not want to make a decision that would be unpopular. And he just did not. He thought they could do it themselves. They could figure it out. And so he didn't actually hire us to help implement what our recommendations were. And that's probably our biggest challenge. We have a discovery phase where we come into a company for about 4 to 6 weeks, interview everybody, do all hands meetings, do surveys, look at process, look at documentation, and then we provide a recommendation that's really custom to your organization, because frankly, everyone's a little different. But he was not interested in that solution. He wanted me to tell him that it was a scheduling problem and that we could fix the scheduling problem. So that's another really hallmark of what we do, is we want to fix the root of the problem. We don't want to go in and fix the branches and then 6 months later you still have the same problem, or you never actually fix it. So we want to provide the highest value, and for us that's fixing that root problem, and this guy did not want to hear that solution. So that's probably our saddest failure, is that we couldn't, I really blame myself, because I knew this guy was a stabilizer. They don't really like change that much, and I should have done a better job of reassuring him that I would take the chaos out of, because he sees chaos for 6 months and that makes him nuts. He just doesn't like it. And I should have done a better job of saying, I will take that chaos on. You can do the work that you do every day. You can take care of your people like I know you love to do, and I will make sure that those people are taken care of too. So that was really a failure on my part to explain how we could honor his stabilizing tendencies and still affect the change that we needed to. So that was really my fault. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned you go in a kind of an even playing field, and take everybody as is, but you're going to find jackasses. So what do you do with the jackasses?
You do find jackasses. You do find jackasses. The hard part is even the jackasses tend to be doing things in a way that they feel like is the right way to do it, right? I mean, I don't know anybody, very few people, that are going to work every day and saying, I'm going to stick it to Alan today and make him pissed every day. I might feel that way, but my business partner would pipe up right now and say, we would get rid of that person, right? She is an HR professional, and she recognizes that bad actors in a company are a liability and high risk. So she's much more likely to kick somebody out. Me, I'm from the federal government background, and there is no hiring and firing, right? There's no hiring and firing. You have to deal with whoever you have. And so I'm much more likely to try to bring up somebody to the level that they need to be. So what we really do is figure out how to, like, we had a board retreat with a group that one gentleman was just really stuck at one place, and he would talk to me about Melanie, but he wouldn't look at her. And then Melanie would talk to me about Alan and wouldn't look at each other. But this is not that uncommon, right? I mean, we all have relationships like this in our businesses. So what I had to do is figure out how to get these two to even look at each other and talk to each other, but without anyone being a winner or a loser. Because once you come into an organization, you say, oh yeah, Melanie's been right for 3 years, Alan's a jackass, and all of a sudden Melanie's like, told you I was right, you know? And so I've got to figure out how to, what motivates Alan and what motivates Melanie, and figure out how we can get them together. And so what we ended up doing, Alan was an organizer, and he saw some data that he felt created a situation that was unfair. And Melanie's like, it's not unfair, there's other costs and expenses, and it was so obvious to Melanie that she couldn't even explain to Alan in a way that made sense to him. So what we did is we started whiteboarding. Melanie, tell me what you're talking about. Why is this not a big thing? So we started writing numbers on the board. And finally, Alan looks at me and says, oh, well, why didn't you tell me that 3 years ago? Right? And it was exhausting though, because it was a really tough balance to figure out how to make Alan feel like he wasn't a jackass, because even though everyone else, like, he chased other people off the board because they were sick of his attitude, and everyone else, if you'd asked anyone else, they would have said that he's being a jackass. But he really was feeling like he was in the right here, and he was acting in a way that he felt was beneficial to the team. So anyway, we resolved that, and it only, honestly, all it takes is the light bulb over Alan's head, and the whole thing changed. And they stayed, I left, it was a multi-day retreat of this big organization. I left, they stayed overnight at the bed and breakfast, I left. And I came back and I'm like, there's been a murder here, I don't even know what I'm walking into. They'd stayed up till 2 a.m. drinking beers, and they'd all made nice, and it was like a totally different group the next day. So a lot of times it's just getting to those unspoken conversations, getting to those cultural differences. It's not that these two people are any different the next day. It's that they understand each other differently. And they understand that Alan's an organizer and Melanie's an independent. And what's obvious to one of us is not obvious to the others. Being able to establish the process. So now between these two, we say, okay, when he has a number question and Melanie doesn't understand, he makes sure they have a process now to go over those kinds of issues, so they don't have this. And I was exhausted, but I'm like, after an hour of this, I'm like, is there anything else? Because there was 2 other issues that were related. And I'm like, I'm exhausted, you guys. And they're like, we've been doing this for 3 years. I'm like, I would not have made it in 3 years. So it's amazing what we put up with. That's the other take-home message, I guess, is that it's amazing what we put up with in our organizations, that it becomes the normal, becomes the familiar. And once they become familiar, they're very hard to change. So, yeah. Yes. I'll just take that.
So this is just for conversational pieces, because
Yeah.
I'm kind of geeking out on it right now.
Good. I do too, obviously.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm all
Obviously.
in and leaning
Yeah,
forward
right?
in my chair. So,
Yeah.
and we'll just say a couple past lives. You know, I've been through tons of strategic leadership, strategic planning, ACOE, Myers-Briggs, you know, I'm a whatever, INTJ, blah, blah, blah. 4 lenses, I'm a gold.
Right. Did you do the strength finder? That has 64 things.
Yeah, so
Oh my God.
what I found in a past life
Yeah.
with lots of really super smart people, that was dripping in sarcasm.
Oh, sorry. Super smart people. Not really. Got it.
We have all these labels. I'm INTJ, I'm a gold for 4 lenses, or I'm a blue. And we would get in these group meetings and they would say, well, that's just really not my thing. I'm a fill in the blank.
Right.
So
Gold,
therefore,
whatever. Yeah.
therefore that excuses my behavior, or it allows me to act in a certain way.
Oh, interesting.
Have you experienced this in companies that you've worked with? And how do you get those people to stop using that as an excuse? And like, because you've said, now I'm this, therefore I don't have to communicate in this way.
Right.
You see where I'm going with
I
that?
do.
There's no question in there.
I do. There's a lot in there, actually. No, so that's really interesting you say that. This is one of the important things that we do with our stuff, is that we actually embed it in a leadership context a lot of times. So when we go into a company, we're actually training on accountability, empathy, the change work, the culture types, and we actually talk a lot about living in choice. Sorry, I'm not meaning to point at you, but I'm very excited about it. We talk a lot, we say that we live where empathy and accountability connect. So we are not gonna let you get away with that. We would call you out on that immediately. Say, that's not an excuse. If you're an organizer and you need numbers, after the meeting, you go talk to that person so you understand the numbers. You don't get to say, oh, sorry, I'm an organizer, I don't get it. That's not an excuse. So we talk about, a lot of other work we do is about resolving issues fast, how do you deal with being in the victim loop or the accountability loop, and checking out is what we call the victim loop. And actually that is fun to see people calling out that behavior. That's victim loop talk, we need to change that. So what we really do is we try to build up the accountability side of it in association with this, and that way it becomes an accountability tool, not an excuse tool. So that's an important question. Yes, we've seen it happen, but we don't let them get away with it.
Okay, so at the very last question that we always ask all of our presenters, because we are here to help boost business. And so our last question is, what can we do as a 1 Million Cups community help you in your business?
Oh, I love it. Thank you. That's a great question. Honestly, we would love to work more locally. And that's one of the reasons that we're looking at creating the lower investment level. Because frankly, a lot of the people we work with are, the very high end, they're $30 million businesses or higher, and we just don't have a lot of those businesses here. And so what we would love to do is support more businesses locally. If you know a company that struggles with culture, I'd love to get to know who those people are. There are a few big organizations in town that know we exist, but they don't call me, but I would love another contact there. And then we'll talk about who that might be. But yeah, so our big challenge is a lot of leaders don't know that you can do something about your culture. They just think, that's how it is, I don't know how to fix it. They kind of throw in the towel. So the great thing is that your company is probably fine, but don't settle for fine. Settle for great. Because honestly, if you take care of your people and you understand this and you understand how to motivate them and what excites them and how to get them all pulling together in the same direction, they're gonna blow your bottom line out of the water. And of course, that's what a lot of leaders want to know. How does this affect my income, right? But your people will launch you past your most aspirational goals if you take care of them and do the right thing by them. So a lot of people are like, well, we're doing okay, but people are pissed or they don't like coming to work. But we're still meeting our goals, we're still doing okay. It's like, don't settle for that. So the way that you guys can help is to connect us to people that need our help, connect us to consultants who are already doing work. That's one thing I love about this is, I don't care if you're a healthcare consultant or you're consulting on safety or you're consulting on leadership, understanding this actually allows all that to stick better. And so, help me get the word out. It's everyone right now, there's so much noise in the gig economy and on Facebook and social media. You don't know who to trust, and so it's almost always a personal reference. We just landed a huge contract in Ohio, and that was only because we were referred by a vice president of another company who had a good experience with us. And so that's really how we make each other in the community great, is by sharing each other's skill set. So I would love that, and I have business cards here if you'd like some.